And then what happens after that? Then we believe it deeply. And that's the problem with the current paradigm of water in science. It's deeply believed, but it isn't really understood. So if it's true, as I explained, that comprehensive hydrogen bonding, the more completely they are bonded to one another, the more completely they neutralize each other's polarity. And of course, polarity is the origin of the force that brings them together. So that creates what you might think is kind of a blatant contradiction. And that is, if the force that brings them together completely vanishes when they are together, then wouldn't they just fall apart? Well, actually, no, they won't just fall apart. And understanding why they won't just fall apart helps us understand something else about the H2O molecule, and that is its very high heat capacity, and why that heat capacity is really a collective feature of H2O molecules. It's not a characteristic of the molecule, it's a characteristic of how they interact with each other, and it has everything to do with the elasticity that is the result of the nature of hydrogen bonding. Let's look into this. Here we have an H2O molecule here in the middle. Its polarity at this moment is 0%. So the amount of force it's producing to pull these in is 0. Note that there's 4 hydrogen bonds. 1, 2, 3, 4. I just used the green there to show the location of the hydrogen bonds. Now, if this is 0, then what is holding these here? We're at this moment, we're ignoring these right here. We're just for purposes of understanding what's going on here. So what is holding these here? Well, nothing is holding them there. Then in which case, then why don't they just fall away? Well, they do. And when they do, what happens here? Well, let me just show you. Here we have a situation where those bonds, there was no force holding them, right? So they flew away. But now what happens to this here? Well, it's no longer 0, is it? Now it comes right back. In fact, it comes back right away. As soon as any one of these move, some of that polarity returns. Now it's at 100%. And of course, that means that now it's going to start pulling these back again. Believe it or not, that is the mechanism of H2O's high heat capacity. And the reason this is the mechanism of the high heat capacity is since this polarity returns, they'll all pull back now that this polarity has returned. And now polarity again will drop to 0. So what you end up getting then is a constant situation where they're breaking bonds and reforming bonds. Breaking, forming, loosening, tightening. And that goes on all the time within liquid water. And in that relationship, in these things moving out and reducing polarity and then moving back, moving in and reducing polarity, moving out again, bringing it back. In that relationship, that kind of a pendulumic relationship, energy is stored. This is the heat capacity mechanism of H2O, and it's the reason H2O has such a high heat capacity. Previously, it's been noted that H2O has a high heat capacity, and it's been noted that it exists only in the liquid phase. And it's pretty obvious why that is, because only in the liquid phase are these things free to move. In the frozen phase, there's no movement, and in the gaseous phase, they're so far away from each other, there's no way for there to be a mechanism of heat capacity. But this is the mechanism of heat capacity, and if you were to look underwater, you would see this going on constantly. constant movement of H2O molecules as they get closer and neutralize polarity, pull away, and bring polarity back. And this is one of the most poorly understood notions in all of science, and now it's perfectly understood. It's absolutely perfectly understood now. Now we know why H2O has a high heat capacity. Now you might wonder, well, is science, is science the larger collective of what people believe and what people think, and academia, let's say, if we put it in the context, why does academia not immediately recognize, eventually they will, it's going to take them a while though. Why are they not going to immediately recognize that this is the correct understanding? Since after all, they've completely failed to explain why H2O has a high heat capacity, and that's because they've just managed to bring enough confusion to the issue that they've convinced the public that they understand what they really don't understand. And this is something that happens over and over again in science. And the way it works is, once a certain degree of confusion is achieved, all humans tend to just give up and look for the best explanation. We look for the best model that seems to work, and then we go with it. And then what happens after that? Then we believe it deeply. And that's the problem with the current paradigm of water in science. It's deeply believed, but it isn't really understood. And that's what's going on with water. We have a belief that's very dominant in academia, and the belief is just simply nonsense. They have observation over and over again that shows that their theory is wrong, but they don't quit believing it. And they're so lost that they've gotten into the stage that the pretenders have taken over. And once the pretenders take over, there's not much you're ever going to do to get them to be rational again.